Hey, this is Whiskey here. It's been a while since my last video. I wanted to come on and make a little supplemental about some warrior macros and about my UI. I've been getting a lot of questions about my UI. Now down here at the bottom, it looks like a black bar across my screen. Now I don't go for aesthetics a lot in my add-ons. Pretty much everything I have is for a reason, to help me raid and to help me play. It looks like a black bar. It's really not. It's an add-on called Skinner, and what it does is it pushes up the screen. So what I've done basically is crammed everything about my UI down below this bar and push the screen up, since I wouldn't be able to see behind this stuff anyway. And then it shrinks the screen down, or it zooms it out, so that you can actually end up seeing more of your screen. I just recently got a chat add-on called Chatter, and it's pretty common. It allows you to do a lot of cool things with your chat window, but I didn't care about any of those things. I really could care less what my chat window looks like. The reason why I got it is because it allows you to put your message box up here instead of below, because when it was below, I wasn't able to shrink my chat window smaller than this bar, so it would stick out a little bit. It would stick out up here, and it was really annoying, and I had to do something about it. But normally I don't really go for aesthetics in my add-ons. Now this is Sexy Map. I just picked a map add-on because I was tired of my map being up here, plus it was huge. I wanted to shrink it a little bit. I don't really use the mini-map too much, at least not in raids. I never use it in raids. Not during a boss battle anyway. This is just Bartender down here. Pretty common add-on for buttons. One cool thing that it has in it, and I'm pretty sure Dominoes has this too if you use Dominoes, you can hide, you see the tooltip in the bottom right corner? You can hide that in combat. There's an option in Bartender. Let me see if I can show you. Button tooltip, disabled in combat. Just select that. It's right on the main screen. And so when you're in the middle of a fight, you don't see that if you ever hover over any of your abilities. Down here in the bottom right, I've got my Omen, shows up in raids, and my Recount over here. Right here, you might be thinking this is some kind of Fury Warrior add-on. No, it's just I took a Bartender bar, I had an extra bar, and I slapped it right here. And then I made it click through, so you can't actually click these abilities. You notice the tooltip won't show up for these. And I just use them to monitor my Whirlwind and Bloodthirst in combat without having to look down and stare down at my button bin down here. So it helps me a lot with my rotation. I don't actually use these buttons. I get a lot of questions about which add-on I use for my slam procs. Now, I don't use a slam add-on in particular. It's just Elkano's buff bars. It's the same thing I use for my regular buffs up here, and my debuffs would show up right here if I had any. And what you do is you right click it, go to a new bar group, and give it a name it whatever you want. Just call it Slam Example. You're going to go to height, make it as big as you want, make it as wide as you want. If you want it to get really huge, you can scale it up and get some pretty good size out of it. I'm going to put it wherever you want. Let's put it up here. And now, to filter just slam, you're going to go down to filter, go down to whitelist, go to buff, find your slam on here. You have to actually have practice slam for it to show up on this list. Only abilities that you've gained since you've logged in will show up on this list. I was in a raid earlier, so I've got pretty much everything on there. And then you're going to uncheck show anchor, so the blessing of demonstration goes away. I'll go in here and try and proc a slam. There we go. Perfect. Alright, I want to talk about macros. I think macros are a key part of playing probably any character in WoW, but especially a warrior, just because of all the stance dancing we have to do back and forth, and changing weapons at times. Now, I'll put all the macro text down at the bottom in the information box so you guys can copy and paste it, since you probably won't be able to read anything off the YouTube screen. First macro I want to talk about is the shield wall macro. This is a really common macro in PvP, but it's great for PvE as well, especially in raiding. It's gotten me out of so many situations where I've messed up and got too many stacks or something, or got myself in a situation where I had to run through some fire, or just aggroed some enemies, and I needed an O-ship button. This is it. And you can't get off the sequence without the macro. You can't equip your shield, go to defensive stance, and hit shield wall, before you die in the last split second. You need to get that off within a second and a half, which is what this macro will allow you to do. So, let's see. There, shield wall. The Shattering Throw macro. It's just going to swap you over to battle stance, cast the bloodrage, and cast Shattering Throw. Now, Shattering Throw costs 25 rage, and bloodrage only gives you 20 right off the bat, so you're going to have to do this in combat for it to be effective. So let's try it out. Also, it's going to be pretty common for you to get rage starved after you do this. So here we go, Shattering Throw. And yeah, you're going to be rage starved unless you're in a really high rage environment. But hey, you got off your Shattering Throw with minimal consequences, and that's about the best you can do. Now, I found this interesting macro on Elitist Jerks. If you want to cast a heroic throw in the middle of your rotation, say if you don't have a slam proc and you want to fill that space, like I mentioned in my rotation video, the thing is about heroic throw, it will reset your swing timer, which will be a DPS loss at certain times. So what this macro does is it's going to put a cast sequence on heroic throw, which makes it so you will only cast a heroic throw after a heroic strike and only within 0.2 seconds. So only right after a heroic strike. And that's the only way that heroic throw is effectively going to be a DPS increase if you use it. If you don't want to use this macro, then don't use heroic throw in melee range. Save it for a ranged attack. If you have to run out, you can throw your axe in or whatever you have at it and get some extra damage. I'd recommend using Rend over heroic throw anyway if you're in melee range, just to get in the habit of using the Rend macro, because when you start to get really comfortable with your rotation, that's going to be your next step. You're going to want to pick up improved Rend, and you're going to want to start practicing this macro. Now, see, right there is a perfect time. If you don't have a slam proc, you're going to want to swap over and use Rend. And you can swap over, get a Rend off, and swap back before Bloodthirst or Whirlwind's off cooldown. So it is a DPS increase to use it, and if you use it properly, that is. The Intervene macro. That's a pretty simple macro. It just sends me over to defensive stance, cast a bloodrage, and cast Intervene. Now this is a great macro for mobility, and let's try it out. So you can get places pretty fast with the Intervene macro. Probably the most important and the most simple macro for a Fury Warrior to have is a Slam macro, just because it's part of the rotation. It's just slash cast Slam, stop casting, and cast Slam. So what it'll do is if you spam the button, it won't allow a full Slam to go through. If you start casting a full Slam, it will stop it. Now another good thing to do is when you're using Slam is to jump in the air, so you don't have to worry about resetting your swing timer, because as soon as you start casting a Slam, it will reset your swing timer, and that's a DPS loss in the same way that Heroic Throw would be if you used it.